For centuries, these creatures have been painted as enchanting dwellers of the sea. But beneath their shimmering scales lies a far darker truth. Prepare yourselves as we venture into the abyss, where beauty meets terror, and the legends of the deep come alive. From seductive sirens luring sailors to their watery graves, to vengeful spirits lurking just beneath the icy waters. These are not the fairy tales you've been told before. These are the creatures nightmares are made of. You're about to hear chilling stories of malevolent monsters, unexplainable disappearances, and the haunting pull of the ocean's secrets. Welcome to Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. Season 1, The Oleander Files. Episode 8, File number 205, The Mermaid. I'm your host, Michael. Let's dive in. Mermaids, mythical creatures with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish. They have a long and fascinating history across cultures worldwide. From the beautiful saviors of shipwrecked heroes to the violent and deadly sirens that pull you to your death. The origins of the mermaid go back to ancient civilizations. The Babylonians had one of the earliest recorded mermaid-like deities, the Assyrian goddess, depicted as a woman with a fishtail. She was associated with fertility and water. In Greek mythology, the sirens, originally bird-like creatures, were later depicted as mermaids in later Greek art and stories. They were known for their enchanting voices that lured sailors to their doom. A Roman naturalist, Pliny the Elder, once wrote about mermaids. He romanticized them, and he claimed they existed. They've long said that mermaids symbolized dual nature. This duality was both nurturing and destructive, alluring and dangerous, reflecting the human fascination with the unknown, especially the deep, dark sea. In modern literature and art, mermaids are often symbolized as freedom, mysterious and unattainable beauty. And though that can all be true, these modern stories have seemed to have forgotten their deadly history. Now, I've always had an open mind. In most of the myths and legends, if I didn't already believe in them, I always wished that they would be real. But for some reason, I never let the mythology of the mermaid in. It always seemed so fake. And I think that's because it's been romanticized so much. The beautiful mermaid that just wants to fall in love and be human. Though those stories are fun, they couldn't be farther from the truth. For the story that my great uncle shares in this journal, a true mermaid is anything but beautiful and more deadly than most monsters that he's ever come in contact with. This is that story. My great-uncle, Samuel, and his specialized team of misfit soldiers, Squad 7734, Team Hell, were dispatched on a rescue call. Apparently, some family members and friends of some political bigwigs had gotten themselves in trouble, and my great-uncle and his team had to clean it up. According to his notes, this is one of his earlier missions with the team. So my uncle, his teammate / best friend Bowie, Scotch, Playboy, and one of the newest recruits, Johnny, boarded their Black Ops helicopter and headed for paradise. As they made their way across the crystal clear waters of the South Pacific Ocean, they quickly came across a sleek white yacht named the Eclipse as it drifted lazily 20 miles off the coast of the remote southern isles of Fiji. As the helicopter moved in closer, Playboy joyfully called out, "Are we going fishing, sir? Or is this another bug hunt?" My great-uncle Sam just shook his head, and Scotch, who was sitting next to Playboy, just smacked him upside the back of his head. "Get ready, fool. It could be either one." Quickly, all 5 soldiers exited the helicopter, landing in the water just outside the stern of the vessel. They quickly made their way up the back of the ship. Swiftly, with hardly any sound, they fanned out, searching the deck and the bridge to find nothing. No crew, no disturbances. Bowie whispered to my great-uncle, "There's supposed to be 5 civilians aboard, right? 2 men, 3 women?" My uncle nodded in agreement, just as a bad feeling washed over his body. And that's when the smell hit them. The newest team member, Johnny, spun around with big wide eyes and asked the rest of them, "Do any of you smell iron?" My great-uncle looked directly at him and said, "No, I smell blood." With only one way to go, down below deck, they instantly pushed through the main cabin door and down the stairs. And what they found down there was a nightmare. The floor of the lower deck was covered in a pool of dark red blood, at least 5 inches thick, or as Playboy teased, 5 bodies worth. It was obvious there had been a struggle downstairs, but there were no bodies. And by the looks of the amount of blood, no survivors. Bowie looked around, stunned, and asked, "Sam, what do you think happened here?" And before my uncle could answer him, Scotch sighed and said, "I know what happened. We're just a few miles off from Devil's Reef, aren't we?" They all nodded yes. "Well, I only know of 2 creatures in this neck of the woods that could produce that much human blood. A tiger shark attack, in the worst case scenario." Johnny looked over at him. "What's the worst case scenario?" My great-uncle Sam and Bowie threw their heads back and sighed at the same time, as they both said, "Mermaids." And Johnny let out a laugh. "Mermaids? You mean like the beautiful women with fishtails?" Scotch winced as he surveyed the floor one more time and said, "Boy, you don't know shit about what we do." With an uneasy tension, they all made their way around the lower deck to make sure they hadn't missed any survivors, or at this point, pieces of survivors. And when they found nothing, my great-uncle made his way back up to the bridge. Thankfully, this kind of yacht had its own personal security system. Immediately, they all locked in to review the footage. The footage started with the usual shenanigans of rich young people having too much of a good time. Music, alcohol, sex, sunbathing, dancing. And then suddenly, the boat shook. The 5 people stopped what they were doing, looking around as if it was an earthquake, before any of them had any time to realize that these might be their final moments. Though the security footage wasn't the clearest, suffering from low-res detail, they could all still make out what happened next. 3 silvery blurs flashed from opposite directions across the screen. If you blinked, you would miss it, leaving only 3 of the passengers standing. As a pair, a man and a woman, fell to the floor in pieces. Screams of shock and horror followed, but the other 3 passengers managed to escape down below the deck. The 3 silvery shadows appeared again, 2 of them jumping on either side of the helm, while the 3rd followed through the door down below. The 2 impossible creatures on deck twitched and slithered through the fresh blood and pieces of human, their long scaly tails blending with the translucent silver skin that at first looked human, with the familiar curves of a beautiful woman. Sleek but matted hair slid down their backs, revealing demon-like faces that were both beautiful and terrifying. Their eyes pulled into long slits that seemed to have no soul behind them. Their mouths were dark, with sharp black teeth that bit into the 2 fallen carcasses, and in a matter of minutes, the 2 mermaids had eaten all of them. And that's when they began to moan and writhe along the blood on the deck, before monster-like tongues slithered out of their mouths, licking at what was left of the victims. Seeing enough, my uncle cut to another camera feed down below. And when he did, the one mermaid that had followed the other 3 down had already killed 2 of them, leaving only 1 man left. And this mermaid had him in an embrace. They looked like lovers, holding each other. The man's eyes wide with fear and shock, tears strolling down his cheeks. But he had a small smile as he stared into the face of his oblivion. The mermaid held his gaze, wrapping her lower tail around him, pushing her wet, female-like chest into his. And as he began to shake, she began to laugh, throwing her head back as she squeezed tighter. The man gasped for air before blood started pouring from his eyes and ears and finally mouth. And that's when she slammed her teeth into his face and ate him from the top down, washing herself in the room in blood. The more she fed, the more frantic she moved, tail whipping, clashing against chairs and tables and walls. And after gorging herself on 3 full human victims, she fell backwards into the pool of blood, running her pointy-fingered hands through her hair and painting herself with the victim's blood. The great uncle fast-forwarded the tape, and a few minutes later, the 3rd mermaid made her way back up top to meet her 2 sisters, who had now cleaned the deck spotless of all the gory details. Not a drop of blood in sight. The 2 sister mermaids embraced their 3rd sister as she reappeared on deck. They surrounded her like demonic snakes, twisting around her, letting their tongues drag every inch of her body. She threw her head back, put her arms in the air, and stiffened her tail as her sisters cleaned every last drop of blood off of her. When they were done, all three let out an echoing scream that sounded more like a fire alarm than any animal. And just as quickly as they appeared, they all disappeared over the edge of the boat into the water, leaving a pool of devastation down below. My great uncle Sam turned off the footage and turned to the rest of the team. Playboy, call it in. No survivors. Let's get our ride back here and have them bring them off. I'm going to double check downstairs to see if there is anything left. Maybe there's something I can give to one of the family members. As my great uncle Sam made his way back down to the belly of the boat, Bowie looked confused and said, "I need to check something." He pushed over to the security monitor and replayed the tape. But this time, he backed it up and replayed the footage. This time, slowing down the initial attack. And when he did, his fears were awakened. He called to Scotch. There were 4, not 3. Scotch said, "What?" He said, "Come here, look." And when they slowed the footage down, you could barely see it. But there was a flash of silver, just a split second before the other 3 appeared. They fast-forwarded to the end of the tape again and watched as only 3 exited the boat. Johnny readied his weapon and asked, "Where's the 4th one?" They all looked at the entrance that led to below the deck. Now below the deck, my great uncle made his way down, ankle deep in blood again, angry after seeing the footage as he slowly looked around, using his boots to move through the blood, feeling for anything underneath. And after a few moments when he found nothing, he lowered his weapon and let out a sigh. And that's when he heard the click of the bathroom door slowly giving way and opening, pushing a faint wave of blood his way. From over his shoulder, he could smell her before he saw her. And the one thing the movies don't tell you about mermaids, they smell like the deepest depths of the ocean, almost briny and rotten, but there's a sweetness to it, like some kind of weird pheromone that normally that smell should make you sick, but instead it makes you almost crave it. My great uncle spun around with his gun, but it was too late. The smaller of the 4 mermaids slammed into him like a baseball bat. It hit him with the impact of a sledgehammer, sprawling him out on his back into the pool of blood below. The mermaid screamed again, spitting black saliva from her puckered mouth as her wild, fluorescent red eyes dug into my great uncle's. She whipped across the room like a sidewinder, pinning him down with her arms, her claws digging into his shoulders, her tail knocking the gun from his hands. Now, what they don't tell you in the movies, in children's cartoons, is just how strong a mermaid is. They easily have the strength of 10 men, even a smaller one like this. Her jagged teeth snapped at my uncle's face, not to bite him, but just to intimidate him. And her smell intoxicated him, stunning him in the moment. He knew he only had another 10 seconds before he would fall victim to their deadly pheromone, and he would die just as easily and quickly as the last survivor he watched on the video. He held his breath and whipped his face to the side, burying his nose and mouth in the blood. She pushed down harder, her breasts shoving into his chest, and her tail wrapping around his lower torso in his left leg. She shoved harder, popping one of his shoulders out of its socket, making his face whip up from the blood, and he gasped for one large breath. She headbutted him, and her hair splattered like a wild mop into the blood around his head. She whipped it back wildly, splattering droplets everywhere. Her tongue slithered out, black and briny. The smell of her breath hit my great uncle, immediately causing his stomach to turn and to freeze him in place. It had been too long. Her wild pheromones had now officially locked him in place. Her tongue dragged along the blood on the side of his face, gently tickling his cheek and then his chin. She let it drag across his lips before sucking it back into her mouth, followed by chirps and clicks as she readied herself to eat. My uncle could only watch, and as she pulled back up above him and he could no longer move, his shoulder almost broken. Her weight felt like a small car sitting on his chest. His eyes filled with the devastating horror and beauty of the thing above him. Now he could see that she was monstrous and more demon-like than human-like. But now, as he was paralyzed from the pheromone, he could only see beauty. And my uncle later wrote that in that moment, he didn't want to fight back. He wasn't scared. He was excited. He would have done anything for her. All he saw was beauty. He said it felt like the world's strongest drug. The pull and desire, he said, made it the world's worst addiction. She whipped her tail, splashing around, sucking in a giant hiss of gurgly, bloody air, ready for her first bite. When the door behind him flew open in a crash, and Bowie jumped down, slamming his boots into the thick puddle of blood. And without any hesitation, he unloaded half a clip into the side, and then neck, and finally the back of the head of the beautiful beast. She spun like a shrinking spring, slamming into the walls, spinning like a tornado. Bowie reached down, grabbed my uncle by his boot, and jerked him up the stairs. My uncle says he still has a scar on the back of his head from it bouncing off those stairs as Bowie pulled him up. When he got to the top, Bowie screamed at Scotch, "Now!" Scotch immediately unloaded a grenade down into the belly of the boat, and they all covered themselves as they waited. An explosion of fire, followed by the dull thud of a sonic boom, blasted through the doorway, covering them in flames, blood, and pieces of the mermaid. By this time, my uncle had come back to his senses, and the pain had finally started to hit him. He groaned, pulling himself to his feet, cursing and angry. God damn mermaids. Bowie smacked him on his back. Yeah, you were always a sucker for mermaids. My great uncle Sam said, not funny. In the distance, their helicopter appeared, and they readied themselves to leave us behind. As they ziplined back up into the helicopter, Johnny, the newest teammate, went last, as it was his job to secure the boat. He set it on fire and then jumped on the zipline himself. As they made their way back, they circled around the doomed vessel named Eclipse, and just under the water, they could see the outline of a dozen fishtails circling. Johnny looked over the edge wide-eyed, couldn't believe what he was seeing. And he said, "Holy shit, that could have been bad." They all looked at him stunned, and then over at my great uncle, who had seen better days, and then back at Johnny, who barely had a hair out of place. And my great uncle said, "Yeah, kid, I don't know what we would do without you." Back at base, my great uncle Sam recovered and filed his report. But he said after that day, things changed for him. He used to love the ocean. The beach was one of his favorite places, a place to recharge. But not after that, because the smell of the ocean takes him back to that moment when all he wanted was her beautiful death. All right, fellow gardeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I wanted to take a moment to thank you all who have been reaching out with their stories and your thoughts on some of these episodes, like Stacy from Long Island, who said, "You should really tackle the mermaid myth, because when she was a little girl on summer vacation, her and her family had seen one. She said her father had noticed it on an outcropping of rocks just off the shore. He thought it was just a beautiful woman sunbathing. So when he went to try and get a closer look, he realized that it was not human. Her father managed to get a Polaroid picture of it, and Stacy scanned it and attached it in the email. She says, I have permission to show that photo. So keep an eye out on my socials, and I will show that to you guys. It's pretty interesting and looks a lot like the details from my great uncle's journals. So thank you. And if anybody else out there would like to talk or share their experiences, email me at pbgharvest@gmail.com or DM me on Twitter or Blue Sky. And that leads to the newest update. I'm starting to get worried about these updates because now it's not only affecting me, it's affecting the people around me. I told you that my brother had loaned me one of his personal handguns, and later that week, he had had an accident with one of his back at his house. Well, now he's told me that he needs to distance himself from me because he and his family are getting weird threats on the phone. Someone had actually painted something on his car. 2 words: be careful. Now, I told him I've called the cops. Things should be okay. That he and his family will be safe. I won't let anything happen to them. But he's decided he's going to leave town for a little while. He's not telling me where he's going. It's probably for the best. Until I get a handle on this, it's better I do it by myself. But I will keep all of you in the loop. So keep listening, keep following my journey, and I'll keep sharing. I hope you're ready for the next episode, when I find out what once was just a horror story I used to tell around the campfire or to my friends in a dark closet when we were trying to scare each other. It turns out it was based on a real person. The story was known as the world's strongest man. All right, that's my time for this week. As always, I'm Michael, and this has been Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast, Season 1, the Oleander Files. And remember, monsters are real, and sometimes the song of the sea is a call you should never, ever answer.